Fantastic. So good afternoon, folks in Europe. Good morning, United States, and good evening, people in Asia and other parts of the world. Thank you very much for dialing in today for a live fireside leadership chat. And I'm really happy to have a good friend of mine who's a dynamic, brilliant guy. Many of you know Nitin Rakesh, who's the CEO at Mphasis. And I'd like him to maybe get started straight away with a little bit about himself and his background. And when you left college not so long ago, were you intending on this as your career, Nitin? How have you wound up where you are?
Morning, Phil, and thank you for having me on this chat. It feels like it was at least a couple of generations ago that I came out of college, but I think time definitely has flown. Yeah. When I was in high school, and then of course when I went to engineering school, we were in an era of a new technological dawn, right? We had the whole, the personal computing industry exploding. Gaming was starting to become very interesting. You had started to see some real cool, tech start to impact our daily lives, and this is even before, probably 10 years before the cell phone came about, and then of course we know what happened after the smartphones came up. So I think I was always fascinated by the impact that tech was having on daily lives, and I was fascinated by the possibilities that existed in, if you overlay that with the impact it can have on businesses. So I think in a number of ways, this is not too far from where I thought I'd be. Of course, journey's taken very interesting different paths, but very excited that I have the opportunity to impact some real, big brands and businesses that are right now living in that whole applied tech mindset. And, we've obviously seen some fascinating acceleration of that over the last 12, 15 months. So excited, still wake up every morning, excited about the possibilities, still try to look around the corners because so much is changing so fast. It's hard to keep up sometimes, but very, very excited to be in this phase of the journey.
Great. Yeah, no, I think we first met several years ago, and you were at Sintel, I seem to remember, yeah. And you'd developed something called Sinterbots at the time, which was a forward-looking view of automation. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about. I know you're very proud of that initiative, and and then what you did after that. It'd be great to hear a bit more about what went on then and how that led you to your current role at Mphasis.
No, I think you're absolutely right. We started looking around corners, I would say 2012, 13, 14 timeframe. It seemed like something fundamental was shifting in the way businesses were interacting with consumers and the way technology was shaping that interaction. And I think that in a number of ways has been the foundation of all that we've been doing at Mphasis for the last 5 years as well. At a very simplistic level, right? Everybody on this call, including you and me, we've seen how our lives have changed post smartphones. Right? Almost everything we do, just go back 5 years, maybe 10 years. 10 years is even more stark. Every transaction that you undertake, whether it is a personal interaction, whether it is a business transaction, your banking transaction, the way you pay your bills, almost everything is moved away from what it used to be to really on your smartphone or on your tablet or on your PC. So I think we started to see some of that come out, and I think it was also amply clear that businesses were not ready to make that big shift overnight. So I think the whole thinking about enterprise automation, recursive mindset, keep applying automation, business process by business process, and then at some point that evolved into this fundamental rethink of what we now call front to back transformation, which is really all about how do you interact with consumers has to dramatically shift. Away from being too focused on back office controls and systems and large, complex, applications that sit in your back office that are very monolithic, that were built for a very different era, that were built for a very different mindset. So I think that kind of, in a way, that enterprise automation thinking, consumer interaction thinking led to the formation of these, transformation principles that we now call front to back. And also in a number of ways, the bets we made around where to invest Mphasis dollars, in terms of building capability, also came up from that whole thinking around customer centricity, customer-led disruption, ability to apply technology outside of the core, in a number of ways, reduce the tech debt, shrink the core, use data to drive personalization, N equals 1, every business has to be in the business of one, which means every customer has to be unique. So I think a number of those foundational, principles that we've used over the last few years kind of came from those early days. And, as we saw rapid proliferation of, digital and smartphones. And of course, things like cloud and data really are, a big byproduct of the way enterprises need to have agility. And hence, the whole democratization of compute becomes, the fundamental underlying principle of enterprise tech consumption. So I think that's kind of, I would say, a trajectory, and kind of if you connect the dots, I think those early days were really, really helpful in starting to think about consumer and experience.
Yeah. So who have been your biggest influences along the way, and why, and what are some of the perspectives that have shaped your career the most as you've gone on this journey?
Yeah, I think early on, Phil, I remember when we did the white paper that you put out a couple of months ago, we talked a little bit about, the journey that I undertook. I came from a family of doctors. So I had to kind of go against the grain and end up, with a fairly different career path and a career track. I think there are some things that influenced me early on. And then, of course, in the end, we're all a byproduct of all our experiences. But two things that came up, early in my career. One, I think I got really focused on something called purpose. What is the purpose for a business? So a purpose-driven enterprise potentially becomes a lot more friendly to all stakeholders, and in the end also generates higher shareholder returns. So I think for me, having interacted with people like John Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, create a purpose-driven investing enterprise, as well, one of the world's largest financial services company, but a not-for-profit. Of course, that's one complete end of the spectrum. But I think the common theme that if you look around and see how do you find ways to continuously challenge the status quo, have a little bit of an insurgent mindset, because that's the only way we can make rapid progress, and then find purpose in what you do, even as a business, not just as an individual. So I think to me, those have been important guiding principles, and I've continued to kind of live by them in every day that we try to do something. And I think if you go back and look at our Mphasis journey over the last 4 or 5 years, early on, we actually got together and said, what should we be standing for, as a business? Because a business can't just be in existence for the purpose of making, revenues and profits. So I think so to me, that's the theme of, purpose-driven, management is very, very close to my heart.
Nitin co-authored this book with Jerry Wind on transformation in times of crisis. And maybe Nitin, you wrote this fairly on during the pandemic, and maybe you could share a little bit of your thinking in what inspired you to write this book, and some of the thinking around a growth mindset that inspired you here. So
absolutely, Phil. I think there's a very interesting backstory of the book. We launched the book finally, of course, at the end of last year, so end of 2020 and early 2021. But the book was actually conceptualized in 2018, and the thinking we had when Jerry and I got together, start thinking about putting something out there, was not very different from what we've seen go on in the last 12, 18 months, which is almost every business was under some form of a threat from this consumer-led disruption, a congruence of new technologies, digital experiences shaping customer loyalty. So in a number of ways, a lot of these trends were kind of coming together. And of course, we know the ever famous impact that Amazon has had on the business of retail, of course, media, Netflix. So in a number of ways, the thinking was, can we put together a list of kind of a handbook that enterprises, especially legacy enterprises who've been in business for 25, 30 years or longer, can they use a set of principles to really power their own transformation, or in a way disrupt their own businesses, but to thrive through this disruption? So we started writing the book in 18, 19 timeframe. We identified key mega trends. We wanted it to be a practical hand guide with a lot of examples. And then as we were at the fag end of that exercise, we all got into this COVID lockdown mode, and it was clear that the world was going through something very dramatic and profound. And it took us a couple of weeks to realize that everything we were talking about in the book was just getting rapidly accelerated. I think you call it the digital dog years.
Yeah.
So that was a big realization, that everything we were talking about just got super, accelerated. Whether it was e-commerce doubling penetration in US retail within 30 days, actually, of the COVID crisis, telemedicine, online learning. I mean, industry after industry was going through what one of my clients actually summarized as the future is here, and it came sooner than we thought. So we actually pivoted the book and said, well, how do you use this crisis as an accelerated transformation pivot? And we effectively, put the book out late fall, early winter last year, and formally launched it in December. And the book really talks about 8 principles that any business, or actually any leader, any individual can apply to really use this opportunity or a crisis as a transformation, accelerant. And simple things like shifting your mental models, right? That's a little bit about, if you don't realize that this is an opportunity as much as a crisis, you're not going to be able to actually make that shift in applying those changes. And I think growth mindset really is a foundational principle of that, because growth mindset talks, versus fixed mindset, it talks about having learnability, always looking for an opportunity to grow and learn. And I think we've applied that, of course, through the principle through the process of writing the book itself, because we were writing about something else. We saw an opportunity that gave us the chance to look at this crisis as a glass half full, and we put the book out there. So I think it's a practical handbook, lots of examples, 8 principles. Each principle, it has between 2 and 5 separate examples of companies that are doing something like that, right? Whether it is shifting mental models, or looking at customer and stakeholders, or using open talent and open innovation, experimentation mindset. So I think we had a point of view. We looked at how we could, what was the best way to put it out there, and the book was really an outcome of that. And I think for me personally, it was an example of growth mindset as well, because this isn't something that was natural to me, right? This is my first book. Of course, Jerry had written 20 books before, and he was very helpful and became my teacher and my guide in the process. But it was a fascinating experience, and I think the one thing I learned the most through writing this book was about myself, right? So it was actually a fascinating journey in self-discovery as well to write the book.
So as a leader of a $1.5 billion company now, how has your perspective as a CEO changed, even in like the last 6 months? You can look at different stages in terms of how you go about your job, how you interact with your people, and that sort of thing. What do you think are the key things that have changed for you? And
absolutely, Phil. I think I've been a public company CEO for 7 years. I had a couple other CEO roles before that, but the last 15 months have been like none others. And I think there's some new muscle that we've all had to build. I always felt that leadership is a contact sport. So you have to be out there meeting clients, meeting employees, meeting your own teams, meeting people from the market. Of course, that's how you and I met and became friends. But 15 months ago, all of that shifted pretty dramatically. And I think in hindsight, if I tell you 2 things that I had to really double down on or build on and realize, firstly, to realize it, right? First was, I think the authenticity as a leader, you have to find ways to display that. And there is no other way to lead through a crisis. You have to be authentic, right? If you don't know the answer to something, you say, I don't know the answer, let's find the answer together. Because people expect you to know everything because you're the leader. Right, so there were phases early on where we had to find the right answer. And I remember early April, we actually held a leadership town hall. So 200 plus leaders from the company. And I actually did an old-fashioned audio town hall. It wasn't still easy for everyone to connect through Zoom or WebEx. And the message in the town hall was, guys, this is a crisis we are all living through, but I would like us to see this as an opportunity, because this is an accelerant for everything we stand for. We've been telling this to clients for the last 2 years, 3 years. Let's just take that message out there. And the only way we will get out of this crisis as a business is by actually growing our way out of the crisis. So let's go find a way to grow out of the crisis and start playing offense, because our clients need it, our employees need it. We think we have the right tools and sets of capabilities. So I think that authenticity, not knowing what we don't know, but yet giving the team the right direction, the right guidance, and being authentic about it. Second thing that I learned also some early on, because I was actually in New York, and New York was one of the worst impacted cities in the world, as you remember, back in March, April last year. I think the ability to actually develop empathy and display that and provide that to people is extremely important as a leader in these times. We saw something like that happen again, I would say, at a much bigger scale with the wave 2 in India over April and May of this year. And I think those two traits of authenticity and empathy, besides, of course, trying to lead a business through crisis, stakeholder management, all of the stuff that you used to do. So these were, I would say, these are two new muscles that I had to build, and I had to build them in double time because, we were, in a number of ways, we were kind of flying blind, learning about things every day, evolving situation, evolving data points, managing clients, managing risk and confidentiality, because a lot of our clients are in sensitive, regulated businesses. So I think it's been a fascinating journey of personal self-discovery and building new muscle. I also, had to find ways to, all of us used to be traveling all the while, right? I also had to find ways to not just get sucked into the crisis and stay sane, right? So I actually developed some new interesting hobbies, of course, besides my love for cars and speed. So I did a photo log of New York City in the lockdown last year. It was I published the photo log for anyone to see. Again, slightly different, take. You look at sunsets and you look at flowers and you look at the city that is actually sleeping with the city that never sleeps. So it was a little bit of a juxtaposition of what you expect the city to be and what it wasn't. But that also, again, gave me an opportunity to kind of build on some other senses that sometimes get, missed out when you're running business day to day and you're flying from place to place. So I think fascinating journey of personal self-discovery, build some new capabilities as a leader, and hopefully, give people the strength and fortitude that they need to get through the crisis.
Yeah. And do you feel like there's been a sort of almost a flattening of hierarchies in companies? And you yourself, I've had this myself, you get pulled much closer to your staff than ever. They're much more visible to what you're doing, and we've all become much more efficient with our time. Like, just to go see someone for a meeting now, do I really want to spend an hour going there, an hour going back, when we can just do this thing on a Zoom call and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think there is some merit to, of course, doing things more efficiently and having a little bit more balance in your lives. And in a number of ways, while I haven't met my whole team, actually, I haven't met many of my leaders even once in the last 15 months. Some I've met a couple of times. It's not that we don't feel that we came through this and we got closer, but at the same time, you still need to build personal equity. And I think same thing with clients. I think that we'll have to find in the new normal the right balance between how much physical interaction, personal interaction you need versus how much efficiency you can bring in. And I think we are probably heading towards that very soon. As we speak, I'm on my first domestic US trip. So I came to California yesterday because I think it was important, and I'm meeting the team today in our San Jose operation. So I think I'm excited for it. I'm looking forward to it. But we did find ways to kind of power through the crisis. We found ways to get closer in many cases, because you also go through crisis and you actually find strength in each other, and that brings people closer. And I think that some of that's happened as well with us. But end of the day, we are in what we call high tech, high touch, high trust business, and only that much of that can be done through a Zoom screen, right? So I think we are working hard to find that right balance.
All right. I have made some friends through Zoom. It's interesting, and I had 3 of my closest friends and industry friends. They came over to my house last night, and we had a few glasses of wine and things. And I'm not joking; we were just so excited to see each other after a year and a half that. At one point, I looked at the clock and it was 4 a.m.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, this hasn't happened in years, where you're actually just so excited to actually see people, talk to people. You'll just sit up half the night and just enjoy conversation. And then you go to bed and get up 5 hours later thinking, I'm energized. I really enjoyed that and didn't get as much sleep as I normally do. But it's like, makes it almost felt like a sort of teenager again, with that ability to see people and make time for people who are fun and enjoyable. And I thought, even if I don't see them for another 6 months, that that will last, right? So
yeah, that's the personal equity I was talking about. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. So what technologies on the horizon are going to have maximum impact in your view as we accelerate into this new world?
I think some real exciting stuff coming around the corner, of course, depending on which industry, which segment. Just look at the fast forward acceleration we're going to see with drug discovery and healthcare. I think that's an amazing field in itself. which not that I know a lot about, but I'm very excited to see, what this vaccine development in double take time has actually going to do for other downstream, discoveries. But if I was to look at a broad spectrum of technologies, I think there are two things that we have to continue to keep an eye on. One, I think the rapid advancement in computing power is probably going to take a big leap forward. We've been living with Moore's law for the last 50 years. I think we're about to go on an exponential journey with quantum. And I think that's a very fundamentally different way of thinking about, the power that exists in compute. Also scary because it can, like everything else, it can be weaponized, and think about cyber, in the era of quantum. So I think, but that's one area I would keep my eyes on very closely. And, we've done some good work in that area as a company. We invested about a year ago. We just set up a lab, in partnership with a university in Canada. So there's some real good, I think there is some real good, exciting opportunities with quantum that are around the corner. Second, I think just the impact of the way we think of assisted, augmented, automation, AI, whatever you want to call it. But that whole cognitive space is also starting to get very excited. I think, again, some of that can be scary because there is an ethical issue. But as we've seen the rapid advancement, I think as consumers, we don't realize how much AI we are exposed to on a daily basis, and how much of our actions, something as simple as tapping a button on the browser, is actually giving data back to the machine learning algorithms. But I think just the use of those in improvement of daily life, use of those in improvement of business experiences, and of course, things that are fundamentally going to alter the world, for example, self-driving cars, of course, are something that I'd keep an eye on very closely. And there's an ecosystem play. There is a ability to bring a lot of things together that'll have to enable that. And I'm very excited to see that, there are some large industry initiatives, even on the ethical side, that are being put in place. I think there'll be more regulation that will have to come out, but those would be, I would say, two big areas where you have to keep your eyes out on what's going on. Doesn't matter which industry you're operating in. And I think it's an area where the acceleration is visible as well.
Fantastic. You mentioned a word earlier, authentic, and I think it's a very true word for what's happening right now. And when I look back to what the world was like before the pandemic, and maybe 6 months into the pandemic, was the amount of hype we had to go through in the last 20, 30 years of tech. And it's just all gone. I mean, it's now, if you don't know something, you ask. If people are no longer scared of change as much, and you want to understand the real business benefits of engaging with tech. What does it really do for the organization, rather than, oh, I'm going to get fired if I don't demonstrate my knowledge of RPA or something, right? It seems to be all the hype's been sucked out of the industry, and we're looking very much at the reality of how can we take advantage of a lot of this. And for example, automation. I mean, that was the watchword for the last decade in our space. And every conference we did, it was the automation session was always the lead. And then all of a sudden, it's like taken a much sort of more of a back seat to this race into the cloud, this race to be a virtual organization. And how would you view then how companies are viewing things like automation now? Is it much more, let's figure out the priorities first, and that's something that'll happen naturally? Or, I mean, how do you think the thinking's changed around that?
I think, Phil, two things to keep in mind. One, in a number of ways, the same technologies that we used to talk about with the hype cycle actually came to the rescue of almost every business in March, April of last year. I mean, who would have imagined if you had done a poll or a survey that you normally do of CIOs or CXOs and asked them, what would be the likelihood that they would be able to operate in a 100% remote environment for as long as they have? I think the numbers would have been very, very surprisingly low. So I think in a number of ways, tech came to the rescue of, I would say, almost the entire business community, not just in our industry, but almost every business. Doesn't matter what industry you were in, right? From healthcare to financial services, insurance, retail, logistics. I mean, we've just seen some mind-boggling, numbers that came out of the impact that tech had in survival. I mean, even a restaurant chain like Chipotle actually thrived through the crisis because they had a very strong digital interface that was built up and tested, and people used it, to great effect. So I think that realization was not lost on the C-suite. Actually, it became a board conversation topic. It still is. I've had more C-suite interaction, in the last 15 months than I did probably the 5 years prior now, because everyone's really realized the power that technology brings. And so it's no longer just a CIO, you got to deliver me, more with less, find a way to reduce complexity, find a way to give us more. I think now it's all about, okay, every business is a tech business, every business is a digital business. And by the way, every business is a consumer business. All of that realization happened in the last 15 months, right? Even if you're a B2B business, you're not a B2B business because, in the end, the buyer from the B2B world is also a consumer who expects the same experience he gets as a consumer with, other firms. So I think what that has done is it has elevated the whole transformation agenda. It's a board topic. It's something that everyone's focused on. They're also looking at how can we get this transformation aligned to business outcomes, business objectives. I think that's been the biggest linkage in the last 15 months, which is realization that transformation can actually truly impact business, and it can impact a business in timeframes that the business likes or wants. You can see change every, look at the way people have started to deploy code. I mean, DevOps was a holy grail. It's now a reality, right? Because they want to see functionality launch, drop quicker, right? So I think to me, that has been the biggest shift in the adoption and the realization of what tech is. And every business is now, on that journey. And that gives us an opportunity to actually be that much more meaningfully impactful to almost every business and every operation. From an automation standpoint, it becomes another enabling technology that actually will be, almost every customer journey, every, experience, every data set, all of that has to be native, not just automation, but actually AI. Because you want to be able to use data to make the system smarter. You don't really, you don't wait and have a manual intervention. It has to be self-learning, self-healing, self-launching, right? The business of one only comes about if we have the ability embedded in the system. So again, I think the paradigm has shifted. Cloud is also nothing but an enabler for agility. You're moving away from having a data center, everything in my control, every 5 years I'll refresh, to a paradigm where you want everything on demand, everything as a service. So the instant gratification mindset of the consumer, it's translating to the ability of enterprise tech to become on demand. And cloud is nothing but compute, security, storage, and network on demand.
So how's that changed the role of the CIO? Because I had a roundtable with a few of them recently, and they were saying everything they buy is in the cloud, that everything's about how do you scale, how do you secure. And they're spending a lot more time trying to understand the business context of what the business leaders need, like the CFO, the CHRO. And at the flip, the business leaders are needing to understand how can I actually move some of these processes and workflows into the cloud, and I need to understand how I can scale this stuff. I mean, how's that impacted the role of the CIO and the attitude towards technology, purchasing, and decision making in the company?
I think the CIO role has probably moved a little bit in the direction of the CTO, traditional CTO thinking, which is I need to have the right design and the right reference architecture and the right ability to consume multiple different technology, whether it's a service or a software or an asset. And once you have the design, then of course there is this intermediate step of making sure that you're shifting from we are in this process of going through the traditional consumption mode to this new as a service consumption mode. And there is an intermediate 3, 4, 5-year journey. Right now, every CIO is focused on two things. One, how do I make sure that our transformation is underway from being on-prem to being on demand? That's one big task. Every CIO has a model or a journey for consumption on the cloud, hybrid multi, virtualization, data center modernization. I mean, you different things, different names for the same journey. And the second agenda really is, so that requires, of course, the ability to understand reference architectures and the ability to actually move to that new model. And the second role that will probably get a lot more prominent as business gets a lot more, invested in tech, and as tech gets a lot more invested in the success of companies, will be this role that's, what I normally call the business CIO, which is how do I make almost every part of our business tech-enabled and smart? And I think that's a role that a lot of CIOs are starting to kind of pay a lot of attention to. I wouldn't be surprised if you see many, migrations from CIOs to C-suite to running businesses. I think we've seen that happen in a couple of cases. But I think that's a future that I will be very not surprised with, because I think in the end, if every aspect of your business is tech enabled, then I think there's that gap that you need to fill. You can't be in the C-suite and say, I don't understand tech. That just doesn't fly anymore. So I think the CIO has become a lot more prominent, and in a number of ways is playing that role of making sure that the entire C-suite, including the board, is aware of the technological advancements, challenges, landscape. I mean, cybersecurity, every board member has to learn about it, because in the end, it's a big business risk, right? Especially with what's going on in the last 12, 18 months. So I think that, again, fascinating journey. Again, in hindsight, I think you mentioned in your paper, in hindsight, I look very smart for having bet on computerization of the world or digitalization of the world. But I think, it is something that we are still, I would say, in an early, if you think of this as a baseball game, I think we're still in the second, third innings right now. We have a long journey ahead.
Yeah, I call it the big reset. Some of the conversations I've had are taking me back to about 2005 with ASPs and how do we operate in this virtual model effectively. So, so you work for a mid-sized provider. How's it changed for a company like Mphasis in terms of the types of business that you were going after in the previous days to now, as you evolve with your skill sets? I mean, what do you would say has been the biggest upside and maybe the biggest challenge for you folks?
I think we, in a number of ways, took some time early on in this reset that happened in 2016, 17, and we had to kind of find the underpinnings of what do we want to stand for as a business. And I think we coined this phrase. I mean, we were always known for, having specialization in banking and insurance, and of course, a couple other industries got built up over a period of time. But we took this pivot and said, well, if we foresee this massive shift in enterprise tech consumption, led by customer disruption and the ability to migrate to as a service, we have to be able to build the technology depth, because you can't be in the IT services business in this environment and not have depth in tech. So we coined this phrase, bring the T back in IT. So technology is our business, and what it has evolved to is the fact that transformation is our model. So almost everything we are selling today, we are servicing today, has an element of tech-enabled transformation. Of course, we are still very focused on industry domains, and we are trying to live the same mantra that we preach by, right? So you have to, in a way, eat the cake you bake. So we pivoted our business, we made it a lot less hierarchical. We are running our business by client, right? So the business of one, every client is a unit that we focus on, that provides that high tech, high trust, high touch mindset that we talked about. So I think we've used our scale, the ability to actually drive transformation. We have enough scale, and still, specialist enough to be able to provide that depth and breadth in the transformation roadmap. So I think the congruence of right size with the right competencies is the biggest differentiator that we're taking to market. And each day, the clients vote for us with their dollars. We've been growing faster than industry for 4 years now. We've had, every quarter has been a growth quarter, barring, of course, the June quarter last year. So I think we're very laser focused on making sure that we keep looking around corners and we show up, and we don't just wait for the client to tell us what they need, but we, in a way, show up with an opinion on what we think they need, and become a trusted advisor, get a seat on the table, and in a way, continue to be their transformation partner. So I think that's been the journey. It's still exciting because we have so much more to do. We've seen that acceleration happen in the last 5-6 quarters. It's shown in our financial results. It's shown in our order book. It's shown in our every metric that we put out there. And I think I'm very excited that that we still have something that clients want to buy from us, and hopefully we'll continue to earn their trust.
Yeah. So how do you feel the services delivery model is going to be different next year? India's recovering from the pandemic, and I've been a huge admirer of the spirit and the lack of disruption to smooth delivery over the last several months. But how do you think the service industry is going to look next year as we emerge from this, and then there's this horrific talent shortage? I'm sitting it's worse than ever in terms of where do we get cyber people, where do we get AI, smart analytics from? I mean, how do you think it's going to look and feel?
I think, Phil, let's keep in mind one thing, and I remind this to our team every day when we talk about supply chain and talent. I think one of the big reasons our industry exists is because of shortage of talented people in those quote unquote niche technologies, right? So I think that's our biggest tailwind. And of course, that's also the biggest challenge in growing and scaling the business. So I think our ability to use things like talent transformation capabilities, we have a TalentX platform that we've talked about with you before. Our ability to find raw talent and create and turn them into people that can actually be part of their ecosystem, open innovation and open talent mindset. I think our partnership with Alberta and Calgary is an example of how you can take raw talent and convert that into digital talent. I think we have to just continue to do everything to create that talent. And I think the hybrid world that we're heading towards, and I think we'll get a better sense maybe another 3-4 quarters of what that new hybrid world will look like. But I think it'll definitely be not the same as going back to the office or 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, so we can deliver to customers. I think everyone's realized that there's a lot more productivity that can be unleashed with a new mode. I think that will give us the opportunity to get a little bit more, I would say, nimble and broader with this whole talent, supply, finding talent, the right talent for the right job versus the right talent for the right job in the right city, in the right zip code. So I think that there's an interesting, explosion possibility here of supply chain. There's obviously true globalization of delivery happening as well. We've actually just in the last 12 months, we've actually expanded into so many new locations, from Taiwan to Costa Rica to Mexico to now Canada. Within UK, we've expanded. Within Eastern Europe, we've expanded. So I think there's a lot of opportunity that exists with this new hybrid mode that we are operating in. And to me, this virtualization of supply chain is the biggest benefit and the tailwind.
Okay, so I've got a couple of great questions have come in from the audience in the meantime. So I think what would be great here would be to get some of your views on some of this stuff, which would be as follows. So what's your take on no-code, low-code impact on tech-enabled transformation?
Yeah, I think it's one of those areas of technology where in the short run, we are underwhelmed, but in the long run, we underestimate the impact. So you will see quite a bit of a proliferation of this thinking of expanding the developer pool by using technologies such as low-code. No code is a little bit hard to understand, but yes, you won't be writing native code. You'll definitely see areas where you can actually construct code with simple commands. And I think we've been on that journey as an industry for the longest time. If you look at the level of automation available to developers today, or the platforms that they're writing code on, it's not the same way I used to write code 30 years ago. Debug it line by line. I think the sophistication available to developers is an order of magnitude different. So I think that is the right journey. We've seen that happen, especially in areas where you need business process automation or application of enterprise automation. You'll definitely see a big impact of low code, no code.
Right. And because some questions came in around the quantum lab in Calgary. So what are you ultimately hoping to achieve from that? I mean, when you look at it from obviously, I know you're a curious man when it comes to technology, but what are you hoping to achieve from a growth perspective for your firm as you look at building out this lab?
I think the lab's already been built out. Actually, we set up the lab in fall last year. Started with our next labs. We have a skunk work group that does a lot of this new tech work. We saw enough opportunity with early success, both in terms of the feedback we received from our clients. The whole, we had a strong partnership with a company like D-Wave, the simulators. We were able to actually, create some IP assets and some designs that found some quick uptake with customers. And we realized that we should invest and forward lean on that area, because it's something that will effectively again get accelerated very rapidly. We are working on 4 live implementations of quantum in business situations, mostly around optimization, whether it's portfolio or network. Some on the pharma side for things like demand forecasting and drug discovery. And I think the partnership with the university is really a step forward in actually getting a lot more academic and brain power to help enable the development of these use cases. So I think that's the very simple intent. If we can overlay that and double take that with the initiatives that city of Calgary is undertaking in building a quantum city, I think that will be a really great use case for us to be able to take back to every other customer. So I think this is a huge, initiative in leaning forward on the overall tech space in that area, and finding, a set of use cases that not only develop our own competencies, but also we can take back to our clients and double take time and stay ahead of competition.
Wow, stuff. I've also got questions around cybercrime and ransomware. We've seen a market pickup in that in recent times. Do you see this continuing to accelerate? Do you have any insights on how enterprises need to tackle this more aggressively?
Yeah, I think there are only two types of companies when it comes to cyber: ones who get hacked and ones who know who got hacked. So I think the question is, how robust are your defense systems and your practices? And I think there's a whole area of identity and access management that we've built a lot of capability in. We see that as a growth area, but it's also an area where you will never ever be 100% adequate. It'll always be the question is, can you find the areas of residual risk and manage those? And I think that's why the whole quantum initiative will hopefully power us forward there as well, because you can start using quantum encryption. But then, of course, the same technology is available on the other side to people who want to create the disruption. So who stays ahead this is kind of a race against time right now.
Well, interesting, isn't it? Was it that pipeline in the US that got hacked a few months ago? That was incredible. They only asked for $5 million. It's like they must have been paid up so fast.
Again, I don't know if you read, but New York City announced the setup of a cyber kind of a command control system. They're setting up they're putting a lot of money in actually building up the capability to deal with cyberterrorism. So just like we had the conventional anti-terrorism units, you'll see a lot of investment going in by all governments in this issue. So I think this is a hot topic. Every enterprise, every service provider, governments, ecosystem, cloud providers, all of them will actually have to play a role in making the world a safer place, just like we did for the conventional side of the house. Yeah.
It's interesting how much Biden's been fairly vocal about this as well, going to the Russians saying, we got better hackers than you. Attitude. Okay, so here's one. So you're on a desert island, Nitin. You got one book to read. You've got one song you can listen to, and one movie to watch.
That's a tough one. All three are very tough. Well, I'm still on the books to read. I think it'll be probably a combination of maybe good to great genre combined with give and take, because I think those are two different skills and muscles that one needs to build, especially in business. And the give and take is kind of a little bit more, borders on psychology and personal development as well. So I think those would be my two takes. Songs to listen, I'd probably go back to the 80s genre, right? A lot of Dire Straits, some Bob Dylan, some a lot of Eagles. So I'm still, my playlist is still from the 80s, 90s. Of course, I like a lot of the new songs as well, but I would still call those my classics. Driving with the top down and listening to Eagles is still my favorite. So that would be on the music side. And the movies to watch, I'd probably watch, I would say Top Gun. My need for speed. I have to feed that beast.
I don't think I've ever watched it. I never confessed that one. Anyway, I'll make a note of that one. At least you didn't say the Bible. Thank you. So the last two people I've asked that question to, they'd read the Bible. So read into that what you may. So fantastic. I think it's been a really wonderful hour. We've been talking. Obviously, we'll share with everybody the details of the book that you've written, Transformation Times of Crisis, which is a good read. It finally winged its way to me through a pandemic across the Atlantic, and I have my own copy. And also the MVP that we've written together on the vision for the industry, and we'll share that with everybody too. So I think everybody on this line has stayed. We haven't lost a single person in the last hour, so I think that says something for the quality of the conversation and your insights, Nitin. So hopefully we'll get together in New York fairly soon. I'll be there next week, and I really enjoyed having you talk to our network today and share some of your views. And I think in November, we're going to be inviting everybody live to Times Square for a session. So hopefully you'll be along in person. So
absolutely. Looking forward to seeing you, Phil, and also definitely looking forward to having a live symposium, one of your famous symposiums with the happy hours. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So November 8th and 9th, we're going to announce it, I think, tomorrow. So it's at the Convene Center we've used so much before, and it's going to be called Reconvene. So bringing the industry leaders back together, and it's a digital event as well. So I love that expression, right? I have Olivia Newton-John in my head every time I say that. But we're going to have it streamed live globally, and then we're going to have hopefully a couple of hundred people spread out in the Convene itself, where we'll have some great conversations. So fantastic to spend some more time with you, and I hope everybody else enjoyed it. So
thank you, Phil, for having me.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.